Hey, welcome back to Education Through Music, the podcast. My name's Noah. We met last time. I'm your host and an instructional supervisor for Education Through Music, which is not only the name of this show, but also a nonprofit organization bringing music programming to Title I schools in New York City. The question we'll be considering in this episode is, what do early career music teachers most desperately need to know? We're about a month into the school year. The past 4 weeks have been about establishing routines, getting to know one another, and for first-year music teachers, developing an identity as a teacher. This is no easy feat. And so this episode is a celebration of that work, of making it this far into the school year, as well as a few words of encouragement and guidance for pressing on, all organized around this question of what do new music teachers need to know? Upon reflecting on this question myself, it occurred to me that I stood my greatest chance of approaching an adequate answer if I invited some of my colleagues onto the show for a little discussion. Education Through Music is somewhat unique in that it provides schools with music teachers, but it doesn't send them alone. In fact, the organization has a staff of 5 instructional supervisors, of which I am one, meant to support and develop music teachers. Without any further ado, it's my honor to introduce Elijah, Grace, Adam, and Brian. As I'll explain further in just a moment, each of my colleagues with us today has the same title as me, of instructional supervisor, but each of us brings something different to the table.
I guess I should say my name, right?
Say your name.
Ooh, you better sing. Anyway, my name's Elijah J. Thomas. In terms of my skill set, I suppose, or what I bring to the table, I'm really all about music and community. And so what does that actually look like in the most applicable settings? Like, how are you ingraining music into every aspect of the setting that you happen to be placed in, and how are you drawing that out from the place you're in? This idea of creative placemaking. It's like there are people who exist in whatever setting you're in who have their own innate talents and skills and abilities. And as a music educator, as an educator, as a person, an artist in general, how are you sourcing that and highlighting that potential that they have? It doesn't always have to be you as the great mind, as a music teacher, to be the one to bring music to the masses. The music and the potential for whatever that art's going to be is already there. How are you just helping them to highlight that for themselves? And I think that's true with students in the classroom. I think that's true with parents, guardians, and families, other staff members. It doesn't matter who it is, but your community already has that in it. And I do a lot of that work largely through the mediums of community bands, just band in general, wind ensembles, percussion ensembles. That's really always been my thing, is how are we doing music with people, for people, and by people. That and wellness. How are teachers taking care of themselves in as many ways as possible?
My name is Adam Beard. I have a percussion background, but most of my teaching has been focused on middle school music technology. So a lot of the skill set that I have caters to secondary teachers, particularly working with technology and how we can leverage digital audio workstations and notation software to make music an accessible experience to students who may not have classrooms that have instruments that they can play. A lot of the work that I do is to support middle schools and also high schools as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Wright. My strong suit, I think, has evolved over the years, even though I do have a very strong vocal and choral background. Every choir you can think of as a kid, I was on them. But I think now, as I am evolving in this position is become a really strong person in really establishing a great classroom environment, and the importance of that, building with classroom management, building it with all of that responsive language. I've just have had a good time. So that's pretty much my lane, is really helping that teacher establish themselves in the classroom as the authority figure in there. And so I feel like that's my lane and my vendor skill set, you know.
Hi, my name is Grace Lazos. I have been an instructional supervisor. This is my third year in this role. And my specialty is really around social and emotional learning and cross-curricular academic support, and how the arts and arts education influences academic and whole student learning. So I think that music inherently lends itself to promoting social and emotional learning skills with students, and it's a really important part of developing them as people, not just as students and scholars. So I predominantly work with younger elementary. I have a lot of experience in the pre-K to 2 crowd, so I get a lot of our teachers that are with the littles during the school day, and yeah, that's my specialty.
This is Noah again. I have a strings background, a bowed strings and plucked strings background, but I've spent most of my teaching career looking into student agency and creativity in the music classroom. So I've done a lot of modern band and small ensemble and composition focused stuff with mostly secondary students. So now that we're all introduced, the big question is, what do early career music teachers need to know? And this group is particularly well situated to discuss this question, because we are all people who have very recently been in the classroom, and our primary role is to make sure that the people who are currently in the classroom have what they need in order to be successful. So what are some of the things that y'all didn't know in your first year of teaching that you know now, and that you wish you had known your first year of teaching?
It's not mean to say your expectations not as a request. I was very concerned with being a mean teacher, to a point that I let students walk all over me. And now I find myself saying to new teachers fairly often, your expectations are not a request. So it feels right, and especially if you are a particularly polite and considerate person, to be like, please, blah, 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 blah. No. If you are saying sit down now, that's not a request. You need to do that to move on with your lesson. So that's probably the thing that I know, because I did it, that I want to pass on to new teachers. You're not being mean. You're being in control of your classroom.
I wish I had realized how important it was to set expectations and to make sure that those expectations are being met, and that it's okay for you to plan something and it not work out the way that you want. And it's better for you to go back and address whenever expectations are not being met, so that you can have control of your classroom and get through all of the great things that you want your students to learn.
One of the lessons that I know now that I wish I learned then, it was about balancing my life, as far as my life balance, as far as being a musician, a singer, and also now a music teacher. Balancing the times where I need to lesson plan, balancing time where I need to practice. And so understanding that and finding that good median, that good sweet spot of where you don't feel like you are losing out on either.
That's one of the really interesting things about being a music teacher too, is that if you're a history teacher, you're probably not doing a whole lot of history outside of your teaching gig. If you're a science teacher, it would be very cool if you were working in a lab outside of school, but probably you're not moonlighting as a biologist. But music teachers, we do a lot of the thing that we teach, and so finding the balance there's one added layer of complexity, because we want those gigs. We want to be doing music, but you're also teaching. And so eventually you run out of hours.
I think that doing music and also teaching music keeps you a great music teacher. I think it allows you to put into practice what you're teaching other people. And especially I found that out when I taught choirs, when I taught privately. I was like, okay, cool, I have to apply what I'm teaching my teachers, and that makes me in return a great music teacher.
Being a music teacher, being an arts educator, especially within the school setting, you are not an island as much as perhaps you perceive yourself to be. You do not have to be siloed. Just given your discipline, and simply to be an effective music teacher, music educator means that you are striving to be an effective educator, period. So many of the best practices and lessons and ideas and approaches that I learned in my first year especially came from every other person on staff within my school setting. And I was so hesitant to reach out and ask for help from any of them because I felt that they simply would not understand what it is that I'm doing. That it's like the activities that I structure are different than yours, and my discipline is highly specialized and uses this type of academic language you just won't get it, man. And it's like, that was not the case at all. They fully understood in ways that I had yet to realize for my own discipline what was going on with me. And I suppose by extension, a lot of that help also just didn't come from my school staff, but it also came simply from the families that were in my school. That was really fascinating to see, and that was a really beautiful thing to see, is that the whole of the community was there for me when I needed it the most. So
I think the moment that music teachers understand first that they are a teacher, period. They're not just a prep coverage. They're not just a babysitter, but no, they are an educator. I think they will understand the weight and the responsibility and the level of accountability that it takes to be a teacher. I think unfortunately in public school, they've made this thing out that teachers, we're just coverage, and we don't have to put that much time into lesson plans. We don't put that much time into being prepared. So I think that if a first year teacher has to understand that I am a teacher, like there's a responsibility, there's an accountability that I must be up to in order to really accomplish what needs to be accomplished.
Though we are teachers first and foremost, and you are not siloed, and that cross-curricular and best practices go through all subjects. I want to say that for new teachers, simple done well is better than complicated done poorly. Because for people that do not understand your subject and your content, what they know is that sounds cool or that sounds good. And so it's going to be much more effective if you do what would seem to you a very simple song, but all of the kids know the words. They all know the movements. They all know, like, don't bite off more than you can chew because you're like, I want to make a spectacle and be impressive. You're going to get overwhelmed. The kids are going to get overwhelmed. And the payoff isn't even that great of a reward because the people who hear it are like, oh, they tried. Oh boy. Yeah. So, you can keep it simple.
Yeah, it's sort of like when you're when you're stacking up a chord. If you throw 4 different distinct pitches into that chord and they're all right on, you'll resonate. But if you don't get them right on, if you're a little bit off, then that chord isn't going anywhere. It's not going to reach the back of the auditorium. Whereas if you get like one fundamental, you nail that one pitch in unison, it'll carry. Then, once you get that, stack a 5th on there. That'll carry. But
7 in there.
Once you start adding the 7,
right.
So you gotta nail your foundations, your fundamental before you and that's that simple done well. My first year teaching, I didn't co-teach with anybody. It was just me in my room alone trying to figure out a music program. Didn't see anybody else teach really, except when I could like sneak out and go see the teachers who I knew were doing good stuff in their room, which I occasionally did, but you don't have that many preps over the course of a week. So I didn't see enough of other people teaching. My second year, I had the opportunity to co-teach an ELA class, which I was not excited about at first, but the opportunity to see an effective teacher teaching, it didn't have to be music, teaching, just doing good teaching in another room was invaluable. So like, and forming these connections within the school was really important too, because, once you have someone you can go to for a little advice and someone to sort of validate what you're experiencing, that's really helpful for just from a perspective of like staying sane over the course of a wild school year.
It's easy to feel like an island if you don't advocate for yourself. Part of gleaning things from your coworkers who may teach other subjects is making sure that you are taking the steps to get to know people in your building, and to find those opportunities to see good teaching. Whenever you feel integrated in your team, it's a lot easier for you to find people to rely on that can help you with the things that you need help with outside of just actually teaching music. Another thing that's important is to make the work that students are doing in your class visible to your school community, because that will also give you a bunch of support from other people in your building when they see how exciting all the things that the students are doing in your class, especially if you are taking the approach of simple but better versus complex but not as well done.
You have to learn how to develop and establish their classroom culture and their classroom environment. I think them understanding that culture is so important and environment is so important, because case in point, let's take growing flowers. If a flower is not in a conducive environment, it won't flourish. It just won't flourish.
Yeah, it's like what Grace was talking about earlier with making sure that you establish your expectations. And they don't have to be just your expectations. They can be expectations that you co-create with your students. But the important part in that is that they are clear and consistent. I mean, just think about in your life as an adult, as you walk through the world, when things are inconsistent, when something you think you know ends up not being true anymore, that can really throw you for a loop. So you don't want to do that to a child if you can avoid it. Like setting these clear expectations, clear, consistent expectations means that you can depend on some things being true as a child, which is helpful, because you can't do that. You can't expect that in every environment. But when you have some semblance of control, you can establish that for children, which can be so helpful. And reinforcing those expectations, doesn't end up being a thing about like, oh, you did bad, so here's your consequence. No, it's just reminding everybody, like, here we have a little bit of order that we can't have at other places. So let's have it while we can.
I also just want to note that we can say so many things and we can say all of these things, but at the end of the day, it's easier said than done. You are a new teacher, and these are not inherent truths to you yet. They are not built into your body and muscle memory, but they will be if you keep practicing them. However, I have often found that when, and myself included, when you feel that discouragement of like, this didn't go the way I wanted to, or, so-and-so had a bad day today and I feel like it's my fault, like, because I didn't do X or Y or Z, the other thing, you feel that way because you care. Mm-hmm. And that is a sign that you are on the right path. Yeah. Even if it doesn't feel good in the moment, you feel that because you care and you want to get better, because you want the experience for the kids to get better. And you need to hold to that and look for the positives. I am a big fan now, and I was not, I'm going to repeat that again, was not a big fan of recording myself when I first started teaching. But you need to, because you need to see it from an outside perspective. When you're in it, you don't think about anything other than what went wrong. And when you watch it back, you're like, oh, well, that was a moment when everyone was engaged and with me and we were all doing the activity. You need to see those moments back because it's reaffirming to you. It helps you get out of your own head. And every day is a new day. You always have opportunities to bring consistency and try new things. And that's the best part of teaching, is that it's never going to get stuck because you have a bunch of different, if you allow yourself to not get stuck. So yeah, you're doing great and you care, and that's what's important.
And also to that, I think we didn't give ourselves enough grace to make mistakes. You understand? Like I think education period has this humongous narrative that you have to prefer for perfectionism. It's horrible. Either with getting your degree, either with getting your certification. There's this whole big idea.
Pervasive, yeah.
Right. You have to be perfect. But I want a first year teacher to understand, give yourself grace to grow.
What I love that both Grace and Brian are, at least in how I'm perceiving this, are pointing to this idea of reflective practice and how much of your own reflection goes into your craft. And I think it took me a while to realize, like, if I'm not really taking the time to think back on what I've done, not for the sake of, self-criticism or just eliminating all the terrible things from my teaching, but understanding how all of those things are establishing a more sure foundation for where I want to go, then I'm really not going anywhere. It really took me a long time, not just to record. I would script when I don't do it anymore because that's very tedious and it's something else entirely. But there's so many different modes of reflective practice that you can put into yourself. And what I found is that the more that I would just look back on and really think about what it is I was doing, how I was doing it, and the ways I was carrying it out, it helped put so many other aspects of my own life in general into clearer focus. It wasn't just about my teaching practice, but it was also about, like, wow, I need to make more art in order to have that passion that I lead with in my music classroom. I need to just make sure I'm going to sleep on time because that was really hard in my first year, is not staying up till 12 something in the night lesson planning. I need to establish these boundaries. It really helped. It started in the classroom, but it just built from there.
And I think we're talking a lot about what we can do and what you as a teacher can best do to prepare. But guess what the hardest part of this job is? It's not just about you. You can put in all of the work and all of the planning and all of the whatever, but your kids are not an XY output. You can't put in X and they are going to do Y. You can do that to, the best of your ability and anticipate things, but we can't plan for absolutely every scenario and contingency. Even if you have anxiety and think that you can think of every possible scenario, I'm calling myself out here. You can't do that. So just also know that there are other humans in the room with you, and they might react differently than what you anticipated, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't mean they did something wrong. It means that you learned a new thing about your students that you can take and reflect on, thank you, Elijah, to implement in your practice next time.
I think this idea of reflection in the face of variables that you can't control is really important, and that's really what planning is about, right? The whole idea of lesson planning is not prepare your lesson that you will run from top to bottom and it'll be great. Planning is not. It doesn't have that much to do with what you're actually going to do. It's an exercise in visualizing your room and trying to account for as many of the variables as you can account for, so that when other variables that you couldn't have possibly imagined or planned for happen, you've got everything else more or less under control so that you can roll with it. It's a little bit like when I was rowing in college, I think it was my senior year, we started doing this visualization exercise where our coxswain, the boat driver, would walk us through our race plan and we'd spend about 6.5 minutes visualizing the same way, we were going to spend 6.5 minutes racing, and the race never went that way. But the fact that we had like taken a moment to just run through as many of the variables as we could meant that on race day we had the mental space available to attend to whatever did come up, and that's what planning is. And so when I talk to teachers about lesson plans, the thing that I'm looking for is not necessarily that you use a certain template or that you have like, this objective is related to, those are important as well, but the main thing is, have you walked yourself through your lesson ahead of time so that when Timmy comes in hungry and argumentative, that you have the necessary like space in your own head to help to like get through these variables that come up.
I had two very quickly correlated yet somewhat tangential immediate thoughts that came to mind. For one, when something I used to say to my students all the time, especially within ensembles and working with young instrumentalists, is this idea of the music starts before the music actually starts. It's like you're shaping and molding and directing an evolving sound, which in and of itself is a miracle. It's a pretty amazing thing to be able to do. So in order to do that, you have to understand that starts with you in and of itself. It's from your body, it's from your internal systems, and then that goes outwards from everybody else. The instrument's just an extension of you. And then another thing that made me think of when you talk about planning and visualizing and trying to encapsulate all those variables or account for as many as you can. One thing that sticks with me from my pre-service, teaching before I got into the field was Dr. Bonvieri, one of my favorite professors. He said, really, at the end of the day, all you can do is start the class. And then whatever happens after that, because something will happen. You have to figure it out from every single said all you can do is start the class. And I still think about that almost every time I step into a classroom. It's like, what is going to happen today? Building my toolkit and my repository of things to do through this planning and reflective sort of relationship over and over again is going to give you more bandwidth to really settle with that thought.
The clincher of all of these things, I think, being if you don't know what the end result looks like, you cannot impart that vision on to your students. It's what Noah said with lesson planning. If you have thought through what this is supposed to look like, even if it doesn't end up looking that way, at least you're able to say, this is our goal. These are the things we need to do to meet that goal. If they're able to meet those things, great. If they're not, then you need to adjust and then rethink it and scaffold it in a different way. But at least you know what the end goal is of what you're doing.
I was talking to a teacher the other day who I think is doing a terrific job. I think that everything that he's done in his academic career and his life in general leading up to this moment has not been moving him necessarily towards teaching. Like, I think he's gotten here in a sort of circuitous way, but the thought that he's putting into his teaching and the very clearly demonstrated care that he's putting into the job, I think, is really cool to see. And we were talking about how things are going and how, like, sometimes it's hard to know if you're doing the right thing, or, often it's hard to know if you're doing the right thing in your planning and your preparation and then in the actual execution of the lesson and that sort of thing. It's just, there's no clear right or wrong answer. I guess there are probably more clear wrong answers than right answers. As long as the kids are all safe, probably what you're doing is fine. And then the step to get past fine is bonus. And and the fact that you care, the fact that you want to get to past fine says a lot about who you are as a person. It means that you are where you should be. It means that you are doing a good job, regardless of your background, regardless of your preparation. Like if you are trying to get past fine, then you are a thoughtful practitioner, and that's a needle in a haystack. Take solace in the fact that you are trying to get past fine, and
You're doing better than you think you are.
yes,
I'm going to say that again. You're doing better than you think you are.
100%.
Because, as Noah said, you care. And that's a good 50% of it. If you don't care, the kids know, the administrators know, we know.
Get out of there.
It's very, then it's not for you. But if you're demonstrating care and desire and want to improve, teaching is committing to being a lifelong learner. And so long as you are wanting to learn and grow, this is the field for you. And you need to hold on to that. Also, if a kid's giving you a rough time, don't take it personally. They are not thinking that far ahead. They are not that planned. It is never that malicious. Again, easier said than done. But it's truly 98% of the time, it's not about you. It's not about you. And that's a hard thing to swallow, especially if it's being taken out on you. But it's really not. It's really not about you. Sorry.
I remember I'm going to start with a little anecdotal story, but I was at a really amazing premiere of a new dance company. And this dance company was, for anyone who's familiar with Vogue Femme, or Femme Vogue, however you like to pronounce it, which is, of course, a staple of so much queer community here in New York City, especially. There's a dancer by the name of Omari Mizrahi, and he is the leader of the legendary House of Mizrahi. And he's absolutely fantastic. Yes, the fantastic dancer and choreographer and just everything. And he said in a talkback after the debut of his company that technique is a culmination of your lived experience. It's not something that necessarily someone just didactically taught you. It's not necessarily the information they just tried to, again, transmit from their mind and their being directly into you. It is you listening and learning and observing and intaking and reflecting in this constant practice, and then doing something with all of that is authentically your own. It's this process of technique is this process of discovering the authentic self. And I think for especially teachers, no matter how early or late in your career you are, I think really always making the effort to discover your authentic self in the classroom and allowing that to lead your practice with your students is probably at the core of everything that you should be doing. I can tell you as an instructional supervisor all the things that I've experienced. As Noah said earlier, we might be able to get you 80% of the way there and give you all this wisdom and knowledge and everything else. But at the end of the day, you are the one in the classroom. You are the one teaching the students. You are the one who is with them most of their literally lives. They see you and the other teachers most of their lives. You know what is best for what it is you need to do. So you need to really lean on yourself and everything that you're intaking in all aspects of your life in order to help lead your practice. Nobody can tell you the teacher you want to be. You have to be the one to really decide on what that is and lead people forward from there.
I think for me, when we're shaping this as a narrative of a love letter to music educators first year, you got to figure out what made you love music at the first time. And I think keeping that at the front of your mind will make you get through some very tough times. How can I get that to my students so they also can feel the same thing that I felt when I first enjoyed music? So find that desire, find that passion for why you just love music, period, and then everything else will fall into line.
If you are able to view music teaching as a musician, as a creative artist, if you're able to view music teaching as expanding on who you are as an artist, instead of seeing it as a deficit to your performance career or taking away from the creative opportunities or pursuits that you want to endeavor on, that is only going to open up more opportunities on any of those paths. And it took me a really, really long time to realize that. And sometimes I still struggle with it. But I think it's really important to understand that because I am a music teacher, as Grace mentioned, I know what gigs I want to take and what things I don't want to do, or what projects are actually worth it for me to go on.
I want to take a moment to thank my colleagues for joining me in penning this love letter to early career music teachers. I want to take a moment also to thank you, the listener, for being here with us as we engaged in this conversation. If you are an early career music teacher, thank you for the work that you're doing for your students and for your community. If you are someone who is interested in music education and seeing the work of early career music teachers succeed, thank you as well. Until next time.